Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Angelique Adams. She is an engineer and former corporate executive who moved into the academic space. She's also the author of the book, You're More Than a Diversity Hire, Women in STEM, the 5 Keys to Unlocking Your Potential. And she also runs Angelique Adams Media Solutions, helping clients level up their leadership skills. I'm really interested to learn more about her shift to academia, the motivation for forming her consultancy, and the role in which public speaking has played in her career. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Neil.
So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied chemical engineering in undergraduate. So what was the motivation to do that?
Well, I got into engineering because a tour guide, when I tried to look at colleges, said there's scholarships for engineering. If you're good at math and science, there's scholarships in engineering. I didn't know what engineering was. I'm an Army kid, so I grew up on military bases all over the world. All of my role models were soldiers, and so I really had no idea what people did outside of a military base. But I knew that I wanted to go to college to improve my economic my economic situation. And I knew that I needed to pay for it some kind of way. And so when I heard there were scholarships available in engineering, I applied. And I chose chemical, again, for a very pragmatic reason. At that time, U.S. News and World Report had, a list of salaries, and chemical was at the top. And I was like, okay, I don't know anything anyway, so why not just pick the one that makes the most money? So that's how I got into chemical engineering.
Interesting. So it could have been anything. If you had learned there was free money for something else, you would have studied that too.
Probably. Yes. Yes. Quite frankly, that is probably true.
I think it's the first time I've heard that reason on the podcast. I've done a number of episodes. Well, but hey,
it worked out.
It worked out. All right. I used to lie about the reason I went into engineering because I was embarrassed by it. So many people that I've interviewed and just spoken to, outside of this podcast and YouTube channel, whenever they talk about why they went into engineering, it has to do with something pretty profound. Maybe either they played with Legos as a kid, or they were a part of robotics club or something like that. Something meaningful. But for me, right. I became an engineer because my father said to do it. and I used to lie about it too. And he wasn't even an engineer. I don't even know why he said engineering, but he said engineering. I said, I finished high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I said, okay, engineering it is. And then that's what it was.
You know what? You are the second person in the last 2 weeks the first time I ever heard it was 2 weeks ago with another person that I know. And he said the exact same thing. He said, my dad said, you don't know what you want to do, so you're going to be an engineer because and I just thought, I'm surprised to hear that 2 weeks in a row. So you're by no means the only one.
All right. Well, there's at least 2 of us.
There's at least 2 of you. Exactly.
For sure. But then I also saw that, I called you Dr. Adams, so you went on to get your doctorate. So what was the motivation to do graduate school?
Okay, we're going to stay on the free money theme here. Because one of the jobs that I did while I was in undergrad was undergraduate research. And so was to earn money doing some undergraduate research. And I also, was one of those residence assistants, in the dorm. So I was doing that. And if you recall, oftentimes companies will come in, they'll buy you pizza to try to get kids, to come and so they can talk about their company. So I was a resident assistant for the engineering dorm at the time. This was at Penn State. And a company came in. So I came and I was sitting next to the person who sponsored it. And I was telling him about my undergraduate research. And I kid you not, he said, if you would be willing to go to graduate school to continue to study that, we will pay for it. And I said, sold. and so that was Alcoa. And aluminum company, their research center is based outside of Pittsburgh. And they brought me on and paid for my PhD. And I worked for them for 20 years.
So you were working and getting your PhD at the same time?
Yes and no. So I was employed by them, but they actually let me get my PhD full time.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that was possible.
It's probably not anymore. This was, a long time ago. But yeah, so it was it was too good to be true, really. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. In the back of my mind, I had always wanted to sort of get a PhD. I just thought I was the first one to go to college in my family. Let's go to the end. Let's see as far as we can go. And to have somebody, offer to pay for it was something that I couldn't pass up.
Wow, free money, free pizza. I know where your mind is at. So now you finished your graduate studies. You're now Dr. Adams. What kind of work did you do working in industry?
Yeah, I worked for Alcoa for 20 years. I started out as a technician, then I worked in their research arm, and then I worked in production, manufacturing, raw materials, operations strategy. So I really kind of crossed the gamut in their manufacturing operations and ended up being the head of R&D for one of their business units.
Wow. But then, I know you mentioned that you were there for 20 years, but at some point you decided to move into the academic space. Did you go straight from Alcoa to academia, or was there other stops in between?
There was another stop. So, I had this really fast career trajectory with Alcoa for most of my time there, and things started to slow down a little bit. And so I decided to go back to school to get my executive MBA. I was really interested in working in product development. So prior to that, I'd been doing R&D on the process improvement side of things, and I really wanted to switch into products. And so I went to MIT to get my executive MBA, and at that exact same time, Alcoa really restructured their whole company and weren't really doing products anymore. So I used the executive MBA as a springboard to switch to another company. So I worked for a company called Aperam. I changed metals. I changed from aluminum to stainless steel, and I became the chief innovation officer for Aperam, which is a global stainless steel company. Also got to move to France in order to take that job, which was really cool. And I worked for them for just over 2 years, and then COVID hit. And so I was actually commuting transatlantically twice a month between Paris and my home here in Knoxville for that time. Then COVID hit. I couldn't travel at all. And so I used that free time, if that's what you want to call it, to write the book that you had mentioned in the beginning. And at that time, I think a lot of people during COVID were reevaluating their situations. And so I used that time to really think about, okay, what do I really want to be doing? I like the job I'm doing, but is this really what I want to be doing? And when the book came out, it did better than I ever could have expected. And so I thought, you know what, this whole time, I have really loved working with the scientists and engineers who are creating the innovations more than the innovations themselves, more than the technology. I like the technologists more than I like the technology. And so that is what really caused me to go out on my own and start my own business. And honestly, academia wasn't even on my radar screen as an option. But when I started to do the speaking, do the workshops, and really network with the innovation folks here locally out in the greater Knoxville area, I immediately connected with University of Tennessee and their College of Engineering, and they were really interested in having me work first as an entrepreneur in residence. So I did, entrepreneurship coaching with their scientists and engineers who were interested in kind of taking some of the research out of the lab and out into the world. And then that grew to now what I'm doing now, which is I just launched an engineering leadership program for them, which includes some classes and some certificates and coaching.
Was there free money for the executive MBA as well?
Yes.
Good grief.
Come on now, Neil. I'm not going to pay for my own education.
What do you pay for? That's the question. Your savings account must be flush. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, this is great. I mean, you mentioned that during the pandemic was when you decided to write your book. What was the motivation for writing your book, and what do you hope people take away from it?
Yeah, writing a book was never on my radar screen, but when I was in my executive MBA program, and just talking to the cohort of students that were with me, which are all executives doing all different things, they just found my story really interesting in terms of, being a woman in a very male dominated field, having a lot of success, working globally. And they just kept encouraging me to kind of tell my story. And I put it on the shelf. It's like, no, 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 I'm not that interesting. And then when COVID hit, I really thought, maybe there's something here, but I don't just want to tell my story. I want to really reach out and interview and talk to other women in male dominated, in STEM and get their perspectives too. And so I just started playing around with that. What I hope women get out of the book is really, it's a playbook for how to succeed in male dominated industries and really kind of getting maybe some of the mentoring, some of the behind the scenes mentoring that you may not get just because, you're one of the only people there. And that's basically what it's really about. It's like from an executive level, this is how you grow in your career. This is how some of these decisions are being made about who gets chosen for what. So why don't you let me help you position yourself so that you can grow your career in the way that you want to, and also maybe silence or diminish the volume of some of the naysayers who might be standing in your way.
Of the women that you interviewed, well, was there one prevailing sentiment that they all shared about being a woman in a male-dominated industry? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I think that the most common theme is to minimize in your mind that as a barrier. So oftentimes when we are underrepresented, we feel like that is the biggest stumbling block for us, is that we're underrepresented, people aren't supporting us, etc. And what I heard from women, and was also my own experience, is that if you can in your mind reduce the volume of that as an obstacle and then start thinking about, okay, what are the other potential obstacles that might be in my way, you may find that you have some skills gaps, you have some communications gaps, you don't have the right network. And if you focus on those and fix those, this other thing that is, I mean, nobody's denying that that is there, but this other thing actually becomes much less of a factor in your career. But if you only focus on that, you're going to miss all this other stuff that you actually have control over that you can improve.
Interesting. Was there anything that any of the women you interviewed said that you didn't expect to hear? And if so, what's one of them?
Didn't expect to hear. Honestly, no. I really felt like the women that I interviewed, and I don't know if I, just selected people inadvertently, but really we had such a common shared experience. And even more than that, Neil, I'll tell you, I then thought I was going to be an author. So I immediately on the back of that book wrote a second book with one of my classmates from MIT who was in the college athletics industry. So she was an athletic director for the NCAA, and we interviewed women athletic directors, male dominated field again. Their stories were almost exactly the same as the stories of the women in STEM, and their sort of feedback was very similar. It's like, yeah, this is true. It's, we have these issues, and when we really focus on these other pieces, we have found that we can overcome the obstacle of being the only woman in the room. So I really found much more commonality than any kind of specific surprises.
Interesting. I mean, I also mentioned in the intro that you have a consultancy. So I'm curious, with Angelique Adams Media Solutions, what type of work do you do with your clients, and what kind of outcomes do they tend to have?
Yeah, so I do training and coaching with scientists and engineers. My private practice consultancy really focuses on PhD engineers. And then the work that I do at UT focuses more on like undergrads. And what I do is I teach them how to bring their ideas to have more of an impact, whether it be inside an organization or if they're entrepreneurs and want to bring their ideas out into the world. I focus primarily on communication and then also sort of basic leadership skills. Most of the clients that I work with are people who are coming pretty close on the heels of finishing their PhD. So not a lot of industry experience, but they have maybe developed this intellectual property that they want to take out into the world. And it's primarily in the hard tech, clean tech space. There's a lot of interest in those types of technologies. So whether it be government funding or even venture funding. And so they're quickly trying to go from, okay, I was in the lab. Now I'm the CEO of a company. What do I do? How do I communicate my idea? How do I build a team? How do I get funding? How do I manage myself, but also manage a team? And so I help them with all of those things. Those are all the things that I did, as a chief innovation officer for many years.
Okay, that's great that there are people like you that are out there to help those people, because I get the sense that, especially for those coming out of STEM-based PhD programs, the idea, maybe they started out with the idea of staying in academia, but they quickly or at least at some point realize that there are more of them graduating than there are tenure track positions available for them. So they got to find something else to do. And that's something else, maybe forming forming a company, maybe going into industry, and figuring out the best way to make that transition is not easy, especially for people that have that much education. And so I'm really glad there are people out there like yourself who are willing to help them out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Dr. Adams, when I first started, well, still the case when it comes to this podcast and YouTube channel, the reason I started it had to do with the fact that when I used to give presentations working as an engineer in medical devices, I wasn't very good at it. The first few presentations I had to give in front of management were rough at best. And I noticed that a lot of the other engineers that had to give presentations, they weren't all that much better at it than I was. But I got a lot better at it over time because I saw the benefit of doing so. Well, so when it comes to your own public speaking journey, is that something that you've always been good at, speaking in front of others? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
I did not start out good at it. I do think I'm pretty good at it now, and teach folks how to do it. I was lucky. So when I first started at Alcoa, they actually had a Toastmasters club embedded in that organization. And I didn't know anything about Toastmasters, but somebody just saw the new young face and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, this is something I think you might want to look into." And so that is my really very first entree into I guess I would say actually trying to improve my public speaking in a real concerted effort. So certainly getting a PhD, you've got to present at conferences, you've got to do your dissertation, and you have embedded presentations that you have to give. Those are very specific for a very specific audience, and most people white knuckle through it, right? Just like get it done and then vomit immediately after, and just like whatever you need to do, which is very different from, as you mentioned, presentations to management, and so on. So I started with Toastmasters, and it became very clear very quickly that this could be a point of differentiation for me. I think that I enjoyed it enough to want to improve, to want to actually study it, to want to actually practice. And I could see the feedback that I would get in the room of people being interested in listening to me. And again, if you think back to what I was saying before about, my entire career, I was the only woman in the room 99% of the time, only a person of color 99% of the time. But now I had the power to garner attention because I could communicate my ideas effectively and comfortably. And then, sort of mid-career, it became, we've got to give a presentation to our entire group has to give a presentation to the CEO. Angelique's going to do it. Like, let her do it because she's going to be the one to best represent our team. And that continued even through to my most recent role in France as chief innovation officer. I was put in front of some extremely high level individuals, out in the world, because okay, let's let her talk about our products, even in some cases it wasn't even in my area. And so just being able to share my ideas and give presentations effectively to leaders was something that really helped me differentiate in my career.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Dr. Adams, about people perhaps being uncomfortable doing those types of presentations and white knuckling through them. I can honestly say I don't think that's ever applied to me, though. the whole white knuckling thing, probably for other reasons. But yeah, I absolutely see that being an issue for some. But I'm also glad that you saw the benefit, like I did, in getting better at it, and look at all the opportunities that came your way because of it. So
Yeah.
now, when it comes to the presentations that you have to give, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Yes. So most of the presentations I give now are trainings. So either in my private coaching business, people will hire me to give, a 45-minute or hour-long training. And so I will deliver those. Or, I'm actually teaching my first course at the University of Tennessee this semester. So I've got, lectures to give. And yes, I do have a process. So the first thing I do is I think about the audience and who those people are and what I think they'll be interested in. Also, sort of where I think they are in terms of their level of expertise, knowledge about the material that I'm going to be sharing. I love to mind map my presentation. That really helps me to think through what I want to share. It also that mind map also helps, I think, the way I describe it, kind of put the concepts in my brain in a different way than the slides will, which is a very linear thing. So it helps me stay on track when I'm actually delivering the presentation, when I mind map it on a whiteboard. So that's kind of where I start, and then I put the slides together, put the visual materials together if there are visuals. The other thing I do, which is something that I think most people don't spend nearly enough time doing, is then I think about the Q&A that is likely to occur based on the materials that I have, and the audience. And this is where I love using something like ChatGPT. I just put in, this is the presentation. This is who I am. This is the presentation I'm giving, and this is the audience. What are some questions I might get? And then I prepare for the Q&A. And then I practice it. So, put the entire presentation together and then practice delivering it a couple of times. Again, depending on the setting, if it's going to be, I don't do a whole lot of sort of stand-up presentations anymore. Most of the presentations I do are more like this, but if it's a stand-up presentation, I'll practice that kind of in the physical form that I think is going to likely occur, just so that I, kind of helps with any last-minute nerves. And then the other thing I do that I'll mention is, I do have a little bit of a ritual that I do right before I actually deliver a presentation. I was doing that even before I was sitting down talking with you, which is just some deep box breathing. And then I have a little, just very short mantra that I say that I try to put in myself in the right mindset before I talk to folks.
Oh, wow. That's great. When you were talking about the importance of having some sort of ritual that you do beforehand to get you in the right mind space, I think that's an excellent idea. Because I think a lot of times people come into these presentations really nervous and really wanting to make sure that everything goes as according to plan. And I really like your idea about using ChatGPT for Q&A to figure out what kind of questions you're going to get, because I think it's another part of a presentation that people might be concerned with, getting questions that perhaps they didn't think or anticipate beforehand. Of course, that can still happen, but if
Sure.
you use the ChatGPT to come up with those types of questions, I think that's an excellent idea. That's something I'm going to start doing. So thank you for that.
Great.
For people who are listening or watching our conversation, Dr. Adams, and they know that getting better at giving presentations or public speaking generally could benefit them, but perhaps they're still on the fence about it. If you had to offer them one reason as to why they should do it, what would it be?
Being able to share your ideas unlocks a powerful network of people that want to help you to achieve what you want to achieve. And so whether it's a personal goal or whether it's a professional goal or a goal for your team or whatever it may be, it starts with being able to convey your ideas and your plans to other people. And then when you do that, it unlocks all these opportunities and people are like, oh, I want to help you with this, or have you thought about this, or let's do this together. And when you keep it all inside and or communicate it in a very ineffective manner, you can't tap into all of those resources. And so for me, public speaking has been a way to unlock a lot of resources and opportunities for myself. And I think that's true for others.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You don't want to be that engineer or technical person sitting in their cubicle mad because somebody else got an opportunity they thought they deserved, but because that other person was better at communicating, well, they got that opportunity. And the more I think about it, why should somebody else, outside of yourself, really really know what you want to convey? It's
Right.
like
Hmm.
we as an individual, we should be our biggest advocate. We should probably be, well, not probably, we absolutely should be the one most concerned with what we put out into the world, and yet we
Yeah.
look at other people to figure out, or to figure out what we know, what we want to
Hmm.
convey. And it's just,
Yeah.
it seems so, like, why would anyone ever think that? Like, everyone else is
Yeah.
thinking about themselves, but we want other people to think about us.
Yeah.
Makes no sense. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on drangeliqueadams.com. You can learn about what I do. I have a blog where I give a lot of ideas, tips, and then also that will also get you to my LinkedIn profile as well.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Neil.